Gentlemen, we are going to continue our discussion here about Islam, and we're going to our flip video 3.2. So we're going to look at how the death of Muhammad affected the Ummah, this Islamic community. And we brainstormed some ideas in class, and now we're going to see the historical basis here of exactly what happened after the death of Muhammad. So we have our central question listed right there at the top. On the left-hand side of your notes, I'm going to use the title screen and the title at the top for what it is that you should be putting on the left-hand side of your notes. So what happened after the death of Muhammad is known as the Sunni and Shia split. Now let's set the scene a little bit. When Muhammad died, Islam had become both a political and religious empire. So this is where things get a little confusing and why some people in modern times get confused about whether Islam is a place. Well, here's why. It's because when Muhammad died, as you well know, there was no political system on the Arabian Peninsula. So when Islam was created, as you saw through the 5 pillars of faith, it really sought to totally revolutionize the entire lifestyle of the people who lived there. So, in turn, the Islamic community created a government and created a system whereby the Arabian Peninsula was unified under the banner of Islam. And so, as a result, we have, at the time of the death of Muhammad, and I'm actually going to highlight this here so we can see on the map. When Muhammad died, you can see that this area in red, the sort of darkish orange, I should say, was the Islamic world under Muhammad's rule. So his empire clearly had expanded outside of the world of Mecca and Medina, included other areas of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. Well, after the death of Muhammad, you can see that the Islamic Empire just rapidly expanded both here into Western Asia and going across into North Africa, going all the way up into Spain, where they eventually stopped at a very famous battle. But point being here that when Muhammad died, he has not just a religion and a following of people who believe in the religious teachings, but truly an empire that is left without their leader. And there was no clear instruction for what it is that would happen when Muhammad died, and he died a peaceful death. It wasn't an assassination or anything like that. But there was no clear line of succession of who was supposed to take the reins after Muhammad's death. So inevitably, whenever and this is true in any sort of transition of power, that if there isn't a clear process for deciding who comes next, that will likely lead to conflict. In this instance, so you can put on the left, we're still working on a Sunni Shia split here, so you can just keep this on the right-hand side. So there was a dispute over who was going to be the caliph. Okay, that's a term, put caliph on the left. The caliph is the title. So and you can put that as well in just part of your definition answer. The caliph is the title of the political and religious leader. The caliph rules over what's known as the caliphate. I'm going to go back to the map for a second. This here would be the caliphate, would be the religious and political world of Muhammad. So the caliphate is the entire area that Islam controlled, that the Islamic faith was built upon, and the Islamic government was then built around. Caliph is the leader, the caliphate is the actual political empire and religious empire of Islam. This leads to what's known as the Sunni and Shia split. You can see the Sunni is one group, that Shia is another group, and you can see that Shia are spelled many different ways. This is Shia, this is Shia, this is Shiite, and that's the same. It's all the same group of people. Immediately after Muhammad's death, they had 4 caliphs that followed the tradition of Muhammad, and they were elected because it was believed that they were all capable leaders. Please put on the left-hand side of your notes that rightly guided caliphs, and then the information white on the right. That the rightly guided caliphs is the period essentially of peace, and the concept of rightly guided would mean that they are following the example of Muhammad. They are doing as Muhammad would have wanted. The first leader was known as Abu Bakr, and then it's not chosen. I'm sorry, this is a little typo here. It's not chosen by Muhammad to be his successors, but chosen by Muhammad's followers to be his successor, because Muhammad himself had not actually left clear plans for who to follow next. But the community came together. The close followers elected Abu Bakr, who was actually Muhammad's son-in-law, and daughter of one of his favorite wives. Husband to one of Muhammad's favorite daughters. There it is. So Abu Bakr was the leader for 2 years. He was followed by Umar, who was, again, followed for a very short succession, followed by Uthman, who was elected. Now, this here is where we have a shift between Uthman and Ali, because Ali was chosen by his father, right? This is an issue now, because now we see that the Ummah, this community of believers, is no longer selecting the leader. And let's also back up here that the The concept of who should follow after Muhammad, this seed of doubt had been laid immediately after Muhammad died. So even though Abu Bakr was peacefully elected and Umar was peacefully elected and Uthman was peacefully elected, you can see that this is happening in very short succession, a very quick period of time. And moreover, this concept of who is to be the official leader, what makes you the true caliph, that issue hasn't really been resolved, even though we have this era of rightly guided caliphs. So when Uthman decides that his son Ali is going to be the next caliph, we have a shift in the process. No longer is the ummah deciding. And the one group of people decides that that's not correct. The ummah should be the leader. The ummah should decide who their leader should be. And on contrast, we have people who believed that the prophet's bloodline should be what determines who the next leader should be. In other words, it should be hereditary leadership, just like the monarchies and the dynasties that we've studied in other places. So this is when the Sunni-Shia split truly emerges. The seeds of doubt have been around for a while, but we don't see a true split until the quote-unquote election or the selection of Ali to be the caliph. So here's where the true split is. Okay? To organize your notes, I would put the word Sunni on the left, the information about the Sunni on the right, the Shia on the left, and then the information about the Shia on the right. So the Sunni were the people who believed that the Prophet's close followers should be the leaders, and they should be from beginning with Abu Bakr, and then they should be elected by the Ummah. So this is where the people essentially that these three men were selected by, they want that process to remain intact. They believe that that Muhammad was just but a man, and that the community should in turn decide who the leader should be based upon what's best for the community of people that Muhammad has created. Now, this group of people ultimately, quote unquote, won the political power of the caliph after several different instances of assassination and revenge. In other words, after the election of Ali, there was all kinds of civil unrest. There were assassination attempts. There was assassination of Ali specifically by people who did not believe that he was the rightful leader. And we see just a tremendous amount of violence emerge from that, because Ali was actually one of Muhammad's descendants. And so there was a belief that the murder of Ali was a truly horrific event, given that he was from the same bloodline as the Prophet. And we saw all sorts of instances of revenge and of assassination attempts. So we see this ummah that Muhammad has worked so hard to create and to unify starting to fragment and starting to pull apart. The Sunni were the ones who were ultimately, meaning in the long term, able to retain political control. It was Sunni leaders who, after that period of difficulty, were able to reassert power and were able to take control and decide that the caliph would be elected from the ummah. The Sunni represent the majority of Muslims to this day. That's their origins, and they have slightly different practices in modern day, but that's the origin of this split. Now, the other side of the puzzle was the Shia, and the Shia believed that Muhammad's family members, beginning with Ali, should be the leaders, and that the bloodline of the Prophet should continue to dictate who the next caliph is and who the caliphate should be controlled by. So the Shia call the people that they believe to be the true leaders of Islam, they call them imams, right? You can put that on the left-hand side of your notes. Now, that's going to get a little confusing, because Sunni Muslims on the other side, they call their teachers or their leaders imams. So we've got a little bit of a confusing term used differently by two different groups of people. But the Shia, in essence, again, believe in that hereditary leadership, and that the imam, the true imam, is someone who is actually a descendant of the Prophet himself. That there is a group of Shia Muslims, they're called the Twelvers, and you can even put that on the left-hand side if you'd like. In fact, I'll add it if you like. That there's sort of a mysticism to this, which is the idea that they believe that there was a prophet who went into hiding, one of the imams that went into hiding, and they believe that 12th imam is going to return. And the Twelvers, in this way, they're a very specific group of Shia Muslims, believe that there is it's almost like a messianic or a messiah characteristic to the return of this 12th imam. Now, again, I'm going to emphasize again, that's not all Shia Muslims, that's just this group of Shia Muslims who are Twelvers. But the point being that you can starting to see the emergence of two very different conceptions of the caliph, of the caliphate, and sort of the faith as a whole. So here's the end result. End result can go on the left-hand side of your notes. The end result of this Sunni-Shia split, after a period of significant civil unrest and violence between these two groups, the Umayyads these Sunni Muslims were the ones who ultimately retained control. And they established, in the midst of the civil war over the leadership, they began to establish Sunni Muslim practices. And these Sunni Islam their beliefs are just, I mean, the concepts of Islam have not changed, but the Sunni Muslims are going to become the majority faith. But for the vast majority, I mean, the core concepts of the Quran, of Muhammad, of the five pillars, these all retain true. But we start to see, as we see in many different religions, a split in some of the practices and some slight variations in the beliefs of the two groups. Now, in modern day, you can even put modern day on the left for that last bullet point, we have a very complicated relationship between Sunni and Shia Muslims. The Muslims all work together, well, in many instances, and luckily are an incredibly peaceful faith, as we well know. But we do see instances across the Middle East of a lot of conflict between these two groups. So for in different time periods, these groups have worked together. Different time periods, they've been at war with one another. In modern day, we see that the large concentration of Sunni Muslims are 80% of the world's population, and well, I should say 80 to 85% of the world's population, and Shia Muslims are in the order of 20 to 15%, 15 to 20% of the world's um, Muslim population. And we see the vast majority of Shia Muslims are actually concentrated in the modern day country of Iran, and Sunni Muslims are far more widely distributed. And we see that in many instances where the two are interacting with one another, there are tremendous conflict. For example, in Iraq, there are Sunni and Shia Muslims who are sadly often at war with one another. So this, unfortunately, the true ummah that Muhammad had built faced a lot of conflict and turmoil immediately after the death of Muhammad. So here are your two analysis questions for me, and we will pick this up discussion with the Umayyad Empire and their many achievements.